Good evening. Welcome to the second workshop in our Afro Antiquity and the Black Archive workshop series, where we're exploring Black memory work, archives as art, and emerging archival strategies. This week, we are joined by the founder of Archival Alchemy, Joyce LeeAnn. Joyce is a certified archivist and an interdisciplinary artist. She has worked for a community archive, a corporate archive, a large public library, and a prestigious museum. However, her archival praxis began as a young girl, and as an act of decolonization, she centers her innate methodologies. In 2011, she self-published her archival text, Sometimes Grief Goes for a Walk. In 2013, she co-curated The Finding Aid, Black Women at the Intersection of Art and Archiving at the Schomburg Center. She is a House of Noire gem and was a Create Change Fellow with the Laundromat Project, as well as a MoCADA creator in residence. In 2017, she emancipated her labor by cultivating Archival Alchemy, a small business that supports creatives and cultural institutions to transform archives through coaching, consultations, creative work, and collaborations. Welcome, Joyce, and I now turn the workshop over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. Thank you for sharing my bio. Again, I just want to, I said this earlier, but just want for the record, for the archive, to extend my gratitude to Claudia for introducing me to Boston Ujima and the work here. And I am grateful for you all inviting me to come and speak about the work that I do. I'm incredibly honored because there's just a way in which I have been betting on myself and really just believing in my own gifts. And this is just such an affirmation to have opportunities to come and run my mouth, which I love to do. And so I hope that y'all enjoy what I have to say, okay? Because I came to talk. And what I don't have no PowerPoint. I'm not a PowerPoint slide kind of girl. So hopefully, if there's another way that you need to access what I'm saying, so I'm going to do some remarks and share some information. If you would like me to repeat anything, if you would like me to explain anything, please just sound off in the chat. I'm going to try to keep it at not talking just kind of more half of our time. So then I would really love to engage you all in conversation about the things that I'm sharing and answer any kind of questions or just see something Claudia and I love to say is because we've collaborated on our work together. We have our practices mirror each other in many ways. And something that we really love to talk about is just the expertise in the room and just really affirming people's archival impulses. And so while I may have an esteemed resume and all the certifications and receipts for what I do, I trust there's much that I can learn from you all here and that you all have a lot to share too. So I think about this more so as me facilitating a conversation versus me leading a workshop, if you will. So I was charged with kind of putting my work into this space of this question for you all this week, which is why a Black archive, also known as why are Black archives important? And as a Black woman, I wrote a bunch of stuff so I could keep myself tight because I told you I could run my mouth. And so I wanted to keep it tight so we have time for conversation. So if I'm looking down, I'll try to make sure I look up, but I am reading my prepared notes. As a Black woman, self-preservation has been my pillar since I was a very young girl, 5 or 6 years old. The personified archive has been my confidant and friend. Our long-term relationship has continuously healed and transformed my life. And that's what I think that's my reference point to a Black archive, is the personal. So many of my amazing Black memory workers and BIPOC and queer folks who are in the archival community really love to speak to like our cultural heritage on a national level, on our community levels, like the ways you all are in community in Boston, Ujima, having like it made its own archive, and those things really inspiring people. But I've been really motivated by my own self-preservation, and it took me a moment in time to get comfortable with that and not to feel like that was self-centered or that that was selfish, and that really as a Black woman, the most radical thing I can do is be focused on the personal. And by personal, I don't mean familial. I mean my life, my story, my materials. Those are the things that I've been preserving. And over time, I continue to look. I just got my life on Sunday, watching some footage of me auditioning to become a gem in the House of Noire. And when I tell y'all, I watched that video like 20 times, and I said, Joyce, you did that, girl. You did that. That's you. That's you. That's still you. That's you. And the ways that I was pumping I was like, girl, we can do it again. We can get our body, like, girl, when I tell y'all, I got my own self up out my seat and did a little cardio dance session, and just now this whole week I done cleaned my house and just did all these things, right? And that's what I mean by like, the archive has been my friend and my confidant, and it has helped me to like, it pumps me up, okay? Former old parts of myself give me life to keep going and to keep persevering through the world that usually is out to get me. You know, I'm one of the last people being considered on the totem pole of needs in our, you know, human interconnected galaxy constellation, if you will. So that's I just want that to be noted as my reference point to a Black archive, right? And that is where like it anchors my work, and then my work does expand beyond myself, but that's what anchors it and what I keep contracting back to. I want to read to y'all again. I'm going to read another way that I feel like I can like speak to this question is something that I wrote on February 18th, 2022. I wrote, Prelude, a contextual statement to the Archivist After Hours virtual boudoir. When I finally sat down to write out these thoughts, I noticed it was 4:44 a.m. My intuition's interpretation of this sighting is to proceed with what I'm thinking, feeling, and seeing. Yesterday, my dear friend and collaborator, Julia Kaiser, and I had a stimulating conversation that I want to preserve and guide me forward. We were checking in about my plan to launch my Archivist After Hours virtual boudoir next Thursday, and if I am ready or should I postpone. By the end of the conversation, we determined that there was no right answer, just an option. The short of it is that I'm choosing to still do it, but the purpose of writing this out was not to decide, but to document the journey of arriving at that choice. The now versus the later boiled down to two levels of preparedness, the external versus the internal. Which one matters most to my process? Where does improvisation reside? Inside the logistics or inside the content? How much does production matter when you are simply sharing your process publicly? Publicly, and how does performance as a method of delivery complicate this? I was encouraged by Julia's reminder that these are creative conundrums and not an indicator of my mental health condition creating unnecessary challenges. Julia said that the more I do anything, I'll get better at everything. The more I'm inside my process, it will begin to feel like a production. That this creative conundrum is something to explore rather than to decide. It is there in that exploration where my vulnerability enters. It lives inside that tension between production and process, preparedness and improvisation. What has been consistent in my process is my courage to be present, to trust my presence to navigate whatever hasn't been prepped. I've often felt dissatisfied with performances of my current work in progress because of the insufficient preparations that failed to live up to my vision. So why not just reschedule when many of these events are self-produced on self-imposed dates? This is where Julia and I's conversation then circled back to this notion of urgency that is also coloring this production versus process rumination. Where does this urgency show up and why? Where does this urgency show up and why? Before fully answering, we ventured off on a tangent on how all of this relates to archiving. When do materials become archival? Especially when the document, text, performance is unending. We decided not to go into that deep end of what makes something a document or a record. Are we anteloping? I said, which made both of us chuckle because of the referencing to library school's favorite "what is documentation" debate. We got back on track, rooting ourselves in an example from our work with a new client who Archival Alchemy is currently consulting on records management. The microscopic level of intentionality and detail they have captured in their data made Julia wonder if their project is more about knowledge management, since they will continue to create in this direction. There is no end. So is it an archive we are helping them to build? I argued that yes, it is, because of the erasures, the omissions, the carelessness of record keeping around the lives of POC folks lingers in front of us as a warning. Those remnants of the past steadily complicate our archival impulses in the present to ensure future records not only exist, but are fuller and richer. And when some of us reside inside Black time, why wait for future researchers when we know what will one day be historic can be utilized right now? Why am I going to keep writing the same words again and again when I have managed to save what I already said? I'm interested in building upon, in editing, in remixing, in activation, in conversing throughout the continuum of time's tenses. At this point, Julia said, generative, that's it. That there's this stereotype that creativity comes from nothing, but what I was talking about is not a blank page. This then led us back to the urgency we were trying to understand before we went down this rabbit hole of what is archival. Again, where does this urgency to perform and share my process come from, even when I don't feel externally prepared? I said it's because I'm working inside this concept of an embodied archive. Currently, there is this anger, disappointment, hurt feelings, and grief that cannot stay inside me, but it warrants preservation. So many people always comment on my gracefulness, but I want the archive of my life to reflect the level of work it takes to heal, to surrender, to let go, to only hold on to what's productive in order to emanate grace. My "Y'all Got Me Fucked Up" playlist has saved many from my wrath, because I literally moved it out of my body instead of being petty. Instead of inflicting more harm, I danced it out. I dance it out, active present word. I dance it out repeatedly because it don't serve me, it don't serve them. But the process of my excavation could inform and inspire someone, because you can't go around it. You gotta go through it. Even I may need to recall this tool, and knowing it's preserved somewhere to revisit, consult, and research when needed, but that I don't need it to live in me. Yeah, I guess I was getting hyped. That's the end of the sentence though. Even I may need to recall this tool, and knowing it's preserved somewhere to revisit, consult, and research when needed, but that I don't need it to live inside me. Then Julia says some super profound shit, the thesis, the main point of all of these words. This urgency is motivated, this urgency to preserve is motivated by the ephemerality of emotions, to attempt to document what cannot be pinned down. But the attempt to do so is not in vain, because an embodied archive is more concerned with processing. So that's why I keep showing up to this work, even when I don't externally feel prepared, because the internal archival impulse to do so matters more. So however and wherever this first Archivist After Hours virtual boudoir happens, and whoever is supposed to take part in that processing will fall into place, and whatever is supposed to be, I'll surrender into the improvisation of logistics, because Spirit said, I'm ready to be present. Now, that went down, y'all. This is from the archive, right? This is from February. I really was trying to figure out if I was going to do this thing. So my good friend Claudia is going to drop a link to the recording of that initial launch of this series, where I'm letting people engage my process, right? When I tell y'all, Spirit said I was ready, but technology and all kind of shenanigans was not, what's Abby saying? Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I was really trying to grapple, with this. And when I tell y'all, it was a hot mess, but it was one of the most profound and beautiful things that I've done, and that it literally became a portal that ushered me from one chapter of my life into this next chapter. It's a whole vibe, complete with me calling my mom and her talking about some random stuff. Claudia was there. It was really random. No, you weren't. I'm thinking about somewhere else you was at. Anyways, I highly suggest that y'all watch the recording, and you can follow me. And Claudia, maybe you want to share my Archivist After Hours Instagram, where I'll continue to allow people to engage my process through this monthly series. The next installment will be next Thursday. It's the last Thursday of every month, right? So again, I'm starting from that point because that's what anchors me in this work. But then as I have been anchored in this work, and as I've come to see the value in this process that I've been developing since I was 5 and 6 years old, I was like, oh girl, guess what? Let me see, what is the best way? I got you, Sierra. Yes, what is the best way for small institutions to begin archiving its work? Yes, I will get to that in a second. what I've come to understand is that these things that I've been doing over time to like help heal and transform my own life in my relationship to the archive, that it is a process and a system that I can coach other people through so that they can also receive that same level of transformation. And so I will be inviting people soon to explore this process with me. And so if you would like to join my mailing list on archivalchemy.com, you can keep posted or also follow Archival Alchemy on Instagram. I start here again because I really want people to understand there's so many times when I do things like this, and so much of what I hear in the community, people are, it's always about like the institutions and the bigger collective archive. But what I really want people to understand is how powerful self-preservation is, and that the more that we can anchor ourselves in that, the fuller our national, global, diasporic records will become. Your institutions, those small institutions, many of which I have supported, let me tell you, they cannot save everything for everybody. They try, and then they have to call folks like me to help them like narrow down their scope, right? So I think really the more that we take agency over our own preservation, like the better. And so I really, really want people to be thinking about that more so. Yeah, so, right, because there's like this whole like, so I'm just like self-preservation, like it's really my jam. And I'm really glad that I'm starting to understand that as the focal point of what Archival Alchemy has done. And there's a project that I worked on last year with, what is Tracy saying? Yeah, large art comes from the personal archive. Sometimes, not always, sometimes large institutional archives also come from those institutional records that document the formation and the functions and the mission of that institution. So they don't always come from personal archives, because a lot of those institutions could also be collecting repositories where they seek out materials that help to fulfill their mission. There's an imperfect archival environment that we exist in. And so one thing that I really think is important is for people, especially in relationship to Black archives, like most importantly in relationship to Black archives, we have to take care of our own stuff. And like, don't be relying on these institutions. I really, you know, there's many of them that I shout outs to Weeksville Heritage Center and the legacy of Joan Maynard, who like put in mad work to preserve that community. Shout out to the Blackavists who are like out of the Chicago area, who are like really helping to preserve that regional history. Shout out to Ariane Edmonds and the JLE Edmonds, what's that girl's name of her project? The JLE Edmonds, the Edmonds newspaper project out of LA. So there's so many people who are doing this work, but it's too much. Blackness cannot be pinned down into one space. It's just not possible. I don't know why we keep trying to fit ourselves into somebody's building. We can't be pinned down. And then those buildings love to kick us out and change stuff up. As soon as we make something cute, then everybody wants to come into that neighborhood. It's just like, I think there's a movement also happening in this work. Okay, we cannot keep fitting ourselves to this one building. Everybody's like, I want to be in that one collection. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because then your materials might stay unprocessed in the back room because there's only so many people who are getting through that work, and the institutions have so much bureaucracy half the time that it takes all these certain things and all of these surveillance, like, and just ridiculous policies to even access it. Then also let's talk about how once you give your stuff over to institution, it's no longer yours. You got to come now and do a research visit at an institution for your own life. My shit is right here in this closet. Okay. And everywhere I'm going, it's coming with me. And if it can't come with me, it's in my body. Cause I cannot be pinned down. You know what I'm saying? Like the realm of like archives, libraries, and museums is going through a big, like, what is that? Like midlife crisis, okay? Like really trying to figure out who the fuck they trying to be and who they really serving and why they doing what they doing. I don't know, y'all. Let me tell you, I have worked for a decade. Most of my time processing collections and institutions. I have worked in all kinds of institutions. And you know what I did? I left and started doing my own thing because it's just so much. There's just so much in that can't, again, it's not to also, I know I'm kind of being hard on them as I should because a lot of it is trash, but it's not all bad. You know, again, there's so many places that deserve kudos for their amazing work that they're doing. But I think we rely too much on that. And there's many of people who are already doing that. And so what I'm here to tell you is that that's not the only way. There's so many other ways. And I'm more interested in the ways in which creativity and like preservation of archives, like, and really using our imagination about like, does it really need to go in a file folder? Is that where it needs? I was hearing y'all's check-ins about where your memories live. A lot of y'all ain't got them in file folders. What's wrong with where you already have it? You know, like I want to affirm that people, y'all be doing this stuff and just don't know what it's called, okay? So everybody, Black people have been preserving themselves since they done came over here against their will, okay? Sliding shit into their hair, putting stuff into the jazz of their bodies, you know, putting it down in the food, and the ways that we speak. Like, why y'all trying to, and people always love, and this is the other thing, this is the last thing I'll say. So Claudia, if you will, my dear, also drop that link to the Black family, united by history, restored by storytelling. Archival Alchemy did a collaboration with ASALH, the Association for the Study of Black History. ASALH is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. They also known as the founders of Black History Month. Shout outs to my little baby business who just was able, like, what? Believe in yourself. That's what I'm talking about, self-empowerment and self-preservation. Like, do y'all just hear what I just said? My business that I betted on myself did a collaboration where I helped the founders of Black History Month create a self-guided certificate program. What? Like, okay, self-preservation at its finest. And that, to Sierra's question earlier, got plenty of tips in there. That is a free program to guide you through so many of the things that go into like preservation. And now with that project, it's coming from a familial lens, right? And that lens and the ways in which it's grounded in this, the history of like Black family reunions and the necessity of Black family reunions, that it grew out of, you know, once emancipation happening and families are like, where my people is, and these curriculums we have, like making sure, you know, if you trying to date somebody, who they people's is, because, and that has happened to me, okay? Let me tell you, you find out who your real daddy is at 16 and you be looking at a family photo album like, oh, I know him. You know, so like it's from this lens of the Black family, but I believe that information there can be accessible to many different people and for many different purposes. It's a crash course in archiving, oral storytelling, and genealogy, all free, all on YouTube. You can even print out you a cute little certificate at the end. And some folks I know who are doing it, they use that certificate to leverage opportunities for themselves. Again, self-empowerment and self-preservation. So I would suggest really getting into, I feel like that is an amazing resource, that program. Again, it's free. I think people should get into that as a way to learn some more things, because my top tips is really stop worrying about tips. Make sure everything you got has a purpose and a place. Don't be trying to do everything and fit yourself into colonial, outdated practices. And just, indulge your imagination in regards to what it is. Be like, how would I, if I just didn't even worry about nobody else, how would I want to preserve this? You might actually let it live longer that way because you care about it and because you put something into it, right? You put your juice and your swag into that, right? Yeah, and I think the other thing that one of the reasons that I'm trying to create this program, this lab, the Archival Alchemy Laboratory, and invite members into this process with me, is because let me tell y'all another little hot tip secret. There is 5,100 resources online to tell you how to do the thing. I can run you an overwhelming, exhausting list of resources about how to preserve. That's just one. And some people get overwhelmed by just that, a solid link. There's enough resources on how to do the thing. What there ain't enough of is spaces for you to do the work. Let me tell you, this shit is time consuming. Oh, girl, I'm hot. This is not for play. I'm really, my hands are sweating. This is for real life. Thank you, though. Yeah, let me tell you, archival work takes dedication. You have to know your why, because that has to fuel a lifetime of preservation, okay? Sometimes but if you ain't about that life, then that's maybe when you do want to holler at them institutions and let them be your stewards. But you may not fit into their scope. Well, all these things, right? But I think there's not enough spaces for people to hold themselves and each other and kind of community accountable to doing the archival work. It don't matter how you do it. Are you doing it or not? People keep loving to collect an assortment of tips. Let me know where you actually using them. Did you apply any of them? Did you even, is your stuff on social media and in your Google Drive, or do you have an external hard drive and know about having one place, different copies in different places? Did you do all that work? Let me tell you, I just did it this week. It took me, I'm still trying to get it done. You know what I'm saying? I always have to keep getting it done. So that's the end of me running my mouth. I'm going to take a sip of my tea and I'm gonna read through these comments and questions and see if there's anything. And I feel like y'all free to come off mute.
Thank you, Joyce. You just muted yourself though.
I know, I sure did, just like random. I was like, okay, be quiet, girl. Be quiet. It's time to be quiet now. You know what is crazy? Why do we feel like we can't take up the space? Even when motherfuckers told you to come through and take up the space, why am I feeling self-conscious about how much I done talked? I got paid to come and talk. Girl, bye. It's crazy. It's crazy out here. This is why Black archives are important. Because
Anita did drop something for you in the chat, Joyce.
Okay. Oh, okay. Let me see. Let me look at it. Okay. So if y'all can help point out, because there's a lot of beautiful.
Yeah. Let me read it out loud.
Okay. Thank you.
Anita.
And can I get a copy of this chat? This is beautiful.
Oh yeah. For
and
sure.
the recording too.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. So Anita asks, is there something distinct or different about personal archiving versus institutional archiving beyond the content and or perspective? She also says, I appreciate you filling up the space.
Oh, thank you. Yes, the difference is what every archive needs to start with, regardless if it's your own personal collection or if it's institutional collection. You need to start with a why. Why are you preserving this? Who is it to benefit? One of the things about archives is that materials get to take on a new life. Those records may have been created for some other random purpose, like that have nothing to do with the ways in which people may research and repurpose them, right? And so there's a way in which an institution or even a personal archive have to really think about why are you doing this? Who's gonna access this stuff? What are you gonna do with it? And so for a personal collection, that looks like, to me, like one of my goals right now in the current project I'm working on is really how to save myself from myself. Because I be having some mental things, like I just explained, just really be making me like not standing in all of who I can be. And just really making it hard for me day to day, right? So there's ways in which this project is really helping me to be more at home in my body. That is the why of this collection that I'm currently creating through my artistic project. In the past, I've done when my best friend and lover committed suicide. I was like, this might take me out if I don't figure out what to do, how to transmute this grief. Now, you see, this grief can't live inside me, but this person, the grief was almost holding space for who was lost. And so I had to figure out a way to preserve the legacy of this amazing person without me needing to be living a life of grief and staying stuck in a space that I was in when I was 21 and I'm about to be 36 in 3 weeks exactly, you know? So it starts with a why. And even when that why translates for an institution into what they call their collection, you know, their collection statement, their mission statement, you know, like say for Weeksville, like they really wanted to make sure that the remnants of this community that was rediscovered in the 60s does not become lost again. And so their scope is more focused in that regional area, you know, so hopefully that answers that question. And this different about personal, yeah. And then, and also, yeah, the institutional records, again, I think sometimes people, and it's interesting because I think sometimes institutions don't also realize they own juice because they are not thinking about self-preservation, right? Because they out here trying to be everything to everybody. And I'm like, but your institutional records are actually the most popping thing y'all got. I'm sorry, like, y'all might want to really try to be, and what I mean by institutional records is all of the different things that they create over time and as they're doing what they're doing inside the institution. I think a lot of institutional collections downplay the power of their own institutional records and need to stop trying to extract stuff from communities and trying to put it in their spaces, you know? So knowledge management, yes, Claudia. Oh, really appreciate, know your why, you gotta know it. Okay, any other questions or comments or concerns or pushback? We love a debate. Come on, Sierra, let's go.
So just for the Anchor Institutions team, we are at the tail end of our session with Joyce LeeAnn. We're talking about archives. So I have a question about messy archives, improper archives. I might have to email this question. I don't know. But my question is, okay, so I know a couple things about archives because I took exactly one class. So I understand the archives preserve national memory. And I understand that, you know, our history is like one of both hypervisibility, invisibility, legibility, you know, sometimes it's only prison records, right, that we can find about people. My question is about like, okay, so within the question of like, you know, it doesn't have to be like capital A archive, right? It doesn't have to be in an institution, it doesn't have to be any of that. It could be in a shoebox, it could be wherever you want it to be. It could be all digital, right? I'm interested, at least for Ujima, and I think for myself, just as a person in the community, and improper archives that are like holding the evidence of like art projects, activism, action, community organizing, etc. What is the question you would ask yourself when you're thinking about an improper archive, an archive that doesn't necessarily perform in a colonial way, but is like needs to contain, you know, what the traditional archive cannot?
I would say stop trying to figure that out, because that's taken away the time of you just actually doing the thing. Just start somewhere. And the thing is, I used to have this stuff in a shoebox. Okay, it was just a bunch of papers in a shoebox that I carried around. Now it's in these beautiful folders in these archival quality boxes. Things can, you can, something we call like, you know, like you may want to gain, okay, yeah, and I'll let this be the last thing. And if you want to follow up with me, Sierra, but I would say really stop worrying about that kind of stuff. So many of those things and trying to contain things and make sure we're doing it right and is actually residual colonial stuff still creeping in, even when you think you're decolonizing something. And then I think also, yeah, maybe you and Sierra can record the follow-up like a special scene. Oh, honey, we love a scene. Don't threaten me with a good time. We put on scenes over here. Yes. So the quick thing, and I'm gonna be, I'll let y'all go about y'all's rest of y'all's business and y'all's time together. But I would also say like there's just not no one way to do anything. That's one of the biggest things I learned in library school. I was like, oh, y'all actually don't. Everybody just has opinions and we just follow in different methods, but like, don't just do it. Just like preserve things. And over time, the records will speak to you and tell you what they need.
What a perfect note to end on. Thank you all. Joyce, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We definitely need to talk to you. Nia's talking about doing a mini part 2, which I'm down for. So I hope that we can get that together.
Listen, y'all can come through.
Yes.
Virtually, we can keep it going here. Because I love to challenge people to stop thinking that y'all gotta, it's just like, just let it go. But people spend too much time theorizing and not enough time like actually doing the thing.
For sure.
Well,
I love a template though, Joyce. I love a template.
We all love
a template. I mean,
I love a template.
I mean, there's plenty of templates out there.
Hot template.
Yes. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Claudia, for making this connection.
Yes.
Enjoyed listening to you all. We're just going to do a round of applause and we're going to say bye to YouTube. Bye, YouTube.